Democracy. It's a word we hold in very high regard. We associate it with freedom, with equality, with the idea that every citizen has a voice. But if we take a moment to look around, the reality we're living in can feel different. There's a tangible sense of division, a current of anger that seems to run counter to those very ideals. And this feeling pushes us toward a difficult, perhaps even unsettling question.
So often, our first instinct is to ask, who is to blame for our political problems? But what if that's not the most useful question? What if, instead, we were to ask, what? What if the system we value so deeply, democracy itself, carries within it the potential for its own undoing?
And this isn't just some abstract philosophical concern. It's something many of us are experiencing in our own lives. Society feels more fractured. Conversations, even with friends and family, can feel more heated. And trust in our institutions, and maybe even in one another, seems to be wearing thin.
To be clear, this exploration isn't about taking a side. It's not about left versus right, or one party versus another. The intention here is much simpler: to hold up a mirror, to reflect on the mechanics of our democratic system, and to reflect on our own place within it.
What's really remarkable is that these anxieties we feel today are not new. In fact, a very clear warning about them was issued more than 2,000 years ago. It came from the Greek philosopher Plato, who identified a fundamental danger he believed was lurking at the very heart of democracy. In his seminal work, The Republic, Plato made a striking argument. He suggested that democracy's greatest strength, its deep commitment to equality, could also be its fatal flaw. By treating every opinion as equal, he worried that it risks sidelining genuine expertise. He feared it could become a simple popularity contest, where the most confident voice, not necessarily the most confident mind, is the one that rises to power. Now, it's important to understand Plato's perspective here. He wasn't an elitist who looked down on ordinary citizens. His concern was far more nuanced. What he truly feared was that in a large democracy, the passions and emotions of the crowd could be easily ignited and manipulated, ultimately drowning out logic and reason. To make this danger clear, Plato offered a powerful metaphor, an analogy that feels just as relevant today as it did in ancient Athens: the ship of state. On this ship, the owner represents the people. They hold all the power. After all, it is their ship. But they don't have the technical skills of a sailor. They don't necessarily know how to read the stars or how to navigate through a storm. Then we have the sailors. You can think of them as the politicians. Instead of working together to chart the safest course, they are all competing with one another. Each one is trying to persuade the owner to hand over control of the ship's wheel. And finally, there is the true navigator. This is the expert, the one who actually understands the currents and the constellations. But amid the shouting and the arguments of the sailors, this quiet, knowledgeable person is dismissed. They're seen as a useless daydreamer, and their wisdom is completely ignored. The outcome, in Plato's view, is inevitable. The sailor who is the most persuasive wins command of the ship. The loudest voice, not the most skilled hand, is given the helm. And for Plato, this is a ship sailing directly into a storm. So that was Plato's ancient warning. But his metaphor becomes almost disturbingly clear when we look at how the loudest sailors operate in our modern 21st century world. A key tactic is to shift the entire focus of public debate. The complex, practical issues of governance, things like improving schools, funding hospitals, or creating jobs, are often pushed aside. In their place, we get emotional, symbolic battlegrounds. And why? Because it is far easier to rally people around a shared identity or a historical grievance than it is to solve a complex policy problem. The consequence of this shift is profound. When politics becomes primarily a matter of us versus them, the very idea of a shared national interest begins to weaken. Loyalty to one's own group can start to feel more important than the well-being of the nation as a whole. And of course, today's loud sailors have access to an incredibly powerful toolkit. Social media and modern news algorithms are often designed to reward outrage and amplify conflict. They can create an entire information ecosystem where fear spreads much faster than facts and where emotion consistently overpowers evidence. This isn't just random chaos. It often functions as a deliberate strategy. You see, a united public is one that can hold its leaders accountable. A divided public, on the other hand, is too busy fighting with itself. The formula is tragically simple. First, create a permanent enemy. Then, cultivate a permanent fear of that enemy. The result is often a permanent loyalty to the leader who promises protection. Fear is the ultimate political tool. A population that is kept in a state of anxiety is less likely to question authority. The promise of safety becomes far more appealing than the burdens and the risks that come with freedom. So we focus quite a bit on the loud sailors, the leaders who are trying to steer the ship. But this brings us to the most critical part of the entire equation. What is the role of the citizens? What is the role of the owners of the ship? Ultimately, the erosion of a democracy is rarely a dramatic, sudden event, like a coup led by a single person. It is usually a much quieter, more gradual process. It happens not through loud, decisive actions, but through millions of small, individual silences. So what do these small moments of silence look like? Well, it's the choice not to verify an outrageous headline before we share it. It's when we stop questioning what we're told, simply because it's easier to go along. It is when we see something we know is wrong and we make the conscious choice to look away. Each one of these silent decisions is like a tiny, almost invisible crack in the foundation of a healthy democracy. In the end, this isn't just about who we elect to lead us. It's about who we become in the process. When reason is set aside, when fear becomes our common language, and when silence feels safer than speaking up, we are left with a final, unavoidable question to ask ourselves. What kind of citizens will remain?